Hafa day and good evening. The Committee on Public Safety will now convene this oversight hearing. Today is Wednesday, October 9, 2019, and it is currently 6:06 in the evening. For the record and in accordance with the open government law, public notices of this hearing were sent out to all senators, stakeholders, and main media broadcasting outlets on Tuesday, October 1st, 2019, and a second public notice on Monday, October 7th, 2019. The agenda for today's hearing includes the following items: Guam Department of Corrections organizational structure and operational procedures, erroneous releases of inmates or detainees, assault on officers, and a review of the contraband situation at DOC. Before we begin, I'd like to recognize my colleagues present. Speaker Munya Barnes, thank you. Senator Moylan, thank you for being here. Senator Therese Talahi, thank you. Senator Amanda Shelton, thank you. I just want to also make it very clear, because there's been some talk within the media that I have taken over the Public Safety Committee. I have not. Senator Piro Talahi is still the Oversight Chair for Public Safety. However, he has given me the authority to conduct oversight hearings within the Public Safety Committee. The purpose of this oversight hearing is to understand the current policies and procedures at the Guam Department of Corrections regarding the release of inmates or detainees, as well as the process to ensure the safety of corrections officers. And we have with us today Director Brennan and the Acting Deputy Director. So, Director Brennan, I would give you the floor and just go ahead and state your name. And I believe you have a statement that you'd like to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Speaker Nelson. Good evening, Vice Speaker Nelson, members of the Committee of Public Safety, and senators. For the record, I am Samantha Brennan, Director of the Department of Corrections. As DOC's director, a mother, a grandmother, and a taxpayer, I know exactly why we are here. This community has the right to feel safe, and that can't happen if we believe that prisoners are erroneously released. If a clear plan to prevent it in the future is not put in place, and if those who commit repeated errors are not subject to adverse action, it also means that DOC must cooperatively submit to legislative oversight, providing any answers we can under the confines of the law and without jeopardizing potential investigations. As Governor Leon Guerrero has stated, the vast majority of those in our law enforcement community work with honesty, integrity, and heart. And we can't let the few who betray the law shut down those who risk their lives defending the law. This is true of DOC personnel as well. In an attempt to place DOC's 4 cases of erroneous release in context, to simply understand whether or not this problem has gotten better or worse over time, I've searched DOC's available records for any historical data on previous erroneous release. Tonight, I am forced to say that prior to this administration, I can find no historical data on erroneous release at DOC, even though rank and file personnel assure me that erroneous releases occurred prior to January 2019. However, when I did go through the system into the computer and I Googled it, I did find 2 stories that was covered by the Guam Daily Post in February of 2018, where there was 2 erroneous releases last year. While we are without the ability to compare Guam DOC data on erroneous releases, my mind still wanted to just know just how unique our errors were. Sadly, we are not alone. Many larger jurisdictions face some of the same challenges. In 2018, a federal judge, frustrated by the erroneous release of inmates dressed down in Washington, D.C. correction officials in court, calling the problem a significant public safety issue created by a department that has a history of high-profile missteps. In 2015, Washington State discovered that a software coding issue led to the erroneous release of 3,000 inmates over a 12-year period. In 2013, New Mexico reportedly began reassessing how it processed prisoner releases after at least 8 inmates were reportedly set free based on faulty paperwork. In Wyoming, a 2012 investigation revealed oversight deficiencies in the wake of the erroneous early release of a man serving time for aggravated assault. And in Pennsylvania, 3 inmates from one prison were reportedly released in error during the summer of 2010. Correction facilities around the country deal with the same issues as the Department of Corrections. But we aren't throwing our hands up in surrender. Once the first erroneous releases were detected, we reviewed our processes, took appropriate disciplinary action in line with administrative rules, and sought help. In partnership with the Guam Judiciary, we implemented the use of the court's VCCH database, allowing our officers to have real-time access to inmate files and release orders, whether they have multiple aliases or not. To do this, we relocated computers, the Judiciary of Guam trained personnel on the use of this system, and we implemented a new checklist. Now, 3 separate databases provide checks and balances in this process. Yet, even with the addition of training and technology, some officers fall prey to complacency, stress, and being overworked. This is why we have met with the Office of the Attorney General to designate a fixed time for the release of inmates and detainees. This will allow DOC to eliminate the potential gap between release orders, commitment orders, or the notice to appear from the Attorney General's office. I also approved the transfer of personnel to the Hub Processing Center to add additional eyes to the process. Lastly, with additional personnel and ongoing training, we are actively considering the rotation of Hub staff and other personnel, ensuring that no single group of officers is responsible for releases. Vice Speaker, we operate in an imperfect environment, prone to human error, under some of the toughest conditions in the government of Guam. DOC isn't perfect, but we recognize our problems and are working hard to fix them. We need your help, and I'm willing to work with this body to honestly address our challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Brennan. I'd like to open it up first for my colleagues if they have any questions. No? Okay. Senator Terlahi.
Thank you. Can you just, I don't know if I missed it, or can you just please explain the circumstances that surround those 4 incidences that you're referring to? Were they always the same human error, or what was the error? If you could just be specific.
So in April of this year, we had 2 erroneous releases that happened. On those 2 occasions, the officers there's 3 officers that have to go through the process and stuff. It was overlooked. The first case was a situation where it was a commitment ordered by the court, but they took it as a release order. So it was an oversight on the officer's part, and that's what happened in that occasion. In the second situation that happened, the individual was, I believe, held on a, give me a moment, ma'am. In the second incident, the defendant was overlooked. He had multiple cases, and in that situation, it was overlooked that he had a secondary case. In those 2 cases, that happened in April. And the cases that happened in September, ma'am, unfortunately, that's an ongoing investigation, and I cannot elaborate on those cases.
So on the 2 cases that you can elaborate on, you're closed, the investigation's closed, and you're satisfied that you've resolved whatever issues? Did that involve one person's error or more than one person?
It was more than one person's error, ma'am, and yes, those issues have been resolved.
And so the 2 that are ongoing, I guess, one of the reasons we're here is because of the allegations that have been made well, never mind. All right. I don't know what we're going to do with ongoing investigation. Let me think.
Thank you, Senator Chalahi. Senator Moylan, you have any questions? Like, later? Okay. Okay. Can you please explain to us what are the steps that you need to take to release an inmate? What are the steps from step 1 to upon release? How does that work?
So whether it's an inmate or detainee, ma'am, everything happens within our hub, which is located here in the Agana Detention Center. So we get an order from the court, and our officers receive the order. It's either served upon us by the marshals, and then we review that and we look at who the detainee is or the inmate. The hub then goes into our three systems. We go into the AS400 and cross-check it there. Then they go into the Navalina and cross-check it and also look to see if there's other cases that the individual may have. And then they also check the VCCH, which is the virtual criminal, computerized criminal history from the Judiciary of Guam. So they cross-check it and make sure that he has no other cases. And if there's a release, then they go through the motions. There's a checklist that they have. They go through the checklist and they check off each and every item to make sure that they've done their due diligence. And then from there, another officer will review it and also do the same thing. And then finally, a platoon commander will go through it and verify all that information and sign off. And only then will the inmate or detainee be released.
Thank you. You get an order from the court. Is this order through the computer system, or does the marshals literally walk the documentation over to either the Agana precinct or Department of Corrections? What is the role that the marshals play?
So if there's an order issued by the Judiciary of Guam, then the marshals provide service. So they have to come up to DOC between 8 to 5 and serve my office. If it's any time after 5, then they go to Agana and then they serve them the document. That document should also be uploaded within the VCCH, and then our officers should be able to also cross-check that. But the marshals have to serve the document should have to serve them the document upon us.
Okay. What is the latest time that upon the marshals bringing the documentation to, if it's after 5 p.m., they'll have to go to the Agana precinct? What time do those orders stop? What time does the work of the marshals end?
Ma'am, that varies. Magistrates could happen at 3 o'clock, and thereafter the documents could be taking time for the clerks to handle it. We can get the documents by 5 o'clock. Otherwise, sometimes the documents may come in at 7 o'clock. It all varies depending on how quickly the court works on their documents.
Okay, so I'm a marshal and I'm walking it down after 5 o'clock to the Agana precinct, so it's 7 p.m. Is 7 p.m. the latest that Department of Correction usually receives these kind of orders for releasing a detainee or an inmate?
No, ma'am. It can come in at 8 o'clock. Again, it all varies.
So the marshal will come in even at 9 or 10 or 11 or midnight?
I'm not sure, ma'am.
Okay. Because we're trying to understand the timeline for one of the erroneous releases. You had a detainee released for several hours, and then within that same 10, 12-hour period, he was brought back. So we're trying to see if you have your platoon commander, the last signatory signing off, how did that platoon commander discover that they erroneously released someone, and what was the process to bring them back?
If I'm not mistaken, ma'am, in the first situation that happened, it was the officer that another officer, I believe, that came in and cross-checked it from another shift, possibly, and then found that there was an error on that part.
Okay. And for the first 2 erroneous releases, is that investigation still ongoing, or have you completed your investigation?
Those are complete, ma'am.
They're complete. For the first 2 erroneous releases, with the investigations complete, do they involve all the same officers, or are these different officers?
There are different officers from both cases, and There was one in common.
Is the one in common the most senior ranking officer on that shift?
Yes, ma'am.
What were the actions taken towards the senior ranking officer who made the mistake twice?
There was letter of reprimands issued to individuals that were involved in both cases, ma'am.
Were the same mistakes made each time?
Can you elaborate? Same mistakes?
So you have the most senior officer being the one in common of the two erroneous releases, right? And in your checklist, you have different areas that you need to ensure have been completed. You have to confirm with the AS400 system. You have to confirm with the HDF database system. You have to confirm with the VCCH system. And there's various areas that you have to check off, like your commitment orders, the contempt of court order, the bench warrant order, parole detainer, federal detainer, active immigration detainer. Were the exact mistakes made when the most senior officer signed off on the release?
So in the two incidents that happened in April, we did not have the VCCH at the time. That wasn't being utilized. So the first two that you mentioned were all checked off. And to answer your question, yes, ma'am.
What was the exact mistake that allowed the release of the inmates?
It appeared that it was just an oversight on the part of the officers.
Oversight how? Did I forget to look at the immigration detainer? Did I forget to look at the commitment orders? Oversight how?
In the first particular case, ma'am, it was a commitment order that was ordered, and the initial officer took it as a release order. So in that particular case, it appears that all three officers looked at it as a release order. So was it an oversight? Absolutely.
Okay. What is the difference between a release order and a commitment order?
A release order means that the individual is being released from our custody. A commitment order means they have been committed to the Department of Corrections.
So on the checklist, this one right here, this is what you use to ensure the release or commitment of a detainee or inmate. Okay. So if I'm the senior ranking officer and I don't see the word release, what would make me think that I should release this inmate or detainee?
Ma'am, at this point, ma'am, I can't really respond for what an officer would say. And for me to respond to that, that would be my opinion. And if I looked at a document and I saw it was a release order, then I would take it as a release order because I would do my due diligence to review the document thoroughly.
So release order would say release order. It would say the words release order.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm going to take a little break and have Speaker Barnes address some questions.
Based on these comments, Madam Chair, Vice Speaker, thank you very much. I'm just looking at the prior to release for a prisoner and then the prisoner's release clearance form. I have two forms in front of me. And I don't know if you can answer this clearly. If not, I invite anybody in the audience with a uniform. They're more than welcome to sit up here and maybe do some clarification, just so that I'm sure. So I guess my question to follow up, Madam Director, or can we invite the officers up because they're the ones doing it? My question is, can we invite the officers so they can share with me because they do the actual work? If it's all right, if they can come up?
Absolutely. Warden, Major Uggan, would you please join us?
Peter can do it? No, it's Sergeant of Arms or one of us.
And Director, after we swear the warden and Major Uggan in, just go ahead and reintroduce them for the record, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
He wants to ask.
Vice Speaker, I'd like to introduce Warden Alan Borja and as well as Major Anton Uggan.
The
Speaker,
question is, I have two forms in front of me, Madam Director, and I know that you don't sign these documents all the
Correct.
time. In one of these forms, on the checklist, prior to releasing a prisoner, there's three signatures, right? The unit officer, the platoon commander, and the hub officer's signature. And then it also, on another document that was updated in October 26th of 2012, shows that prisoners release clearance form, that everything has to be clear. So in order for a detainee or a prisoner to get released, doesn't both forms need to be checked off by everybody?
so if I'm not mistaken, you're looking at the form that's in this hand. That's a older form, and then the one in your other hand is something that we've updated. Is that correct, Major Uggan? So there's
So-
an old, so
This form that says checklist prior to releasing of prisoner, this is the form we are using. The other form was an older form that we had updated to reflect our current operations.
So we can safely say that this release form that's dated October 26, 2012, which was submitted to the senator's packet, is no longer used. It's obsolete.
Yeah, that's the older form that we
Okay.
were using, but we are not using this form now.
Yeah, so it only has one name of duty officer on that.
Right.
So on this release form, it shows that there's 3 different additional signatures that are needed on this one, am I right? So my question to you folks is that if this is the updated form, and it's been used for how many months or how many years now? 3 years?
About 3 years.
3 years. So in order for a detainee to, or a prisoner to be released, then all 3 signatures need to come on. Am I correct?
Correct.
So if those signatures are not there, is there any overriding authority that can still have a detainee released? So this is like a triple check process, right?
Correct.
Okay. So based on that, on the incidents that happened in April, were the documentation provided have the clearance for all 3 signatures?
yes, ma'am. That form was filled out in each incident.
Right, so I saying, so the hub officer's signature was signed and the rank, and then the unit officer name, and then the rank, and then the platoon commander's signature and the rank, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So if those, were those, when the detainee or prisoner was released, were all 3 signatures on?
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm going to ask then, could it be that maybe the detainee or the prisoner, I'm just trying to look at both sides of the equation, could it be that there was maybe other pending issues that could have, or other cases that could have been in place to make one order right, but then there's a pending order from the court that revokes or rescinds a release order? Could that be a problem? Could that be an issue too?
Yes, that could.
Could that be possibly one of the concerns or the issues that came up on the illegal or the erroneous release? Could that be a justification for that?
Yes, it could. Again, these detainees, some of them have several cases by different judges. They could be seeing 3 different judges, and one judge is releasing, the other judge is holding, or he's held on a previous case. So they could have multiple release and commitment orders.
So then if they were released on one end, and then the orders come in after the fact, then it wouldn't be the fault of the officers, right? It would be because of the documentation that needed to be updated and probably wasn't updated. Is that safe to say?
Yes, that is a correct statement.
Does the VCCH have real-time update system for the officer to sign off on?
The VCCH does have real time, but the VCCH, we've only started using it recently. And then it just went up, I think, early this week or late last week. It been out for maybe 2 months. We couldn't access it. But as of last week, it is now back online.
What was the issue of it being offline?
It has to do with the internet or something. It's between the court and they had to come in and fix something. Not on our side, it's with the system at the court.
So it was not down on DOC's end, it was down on the judiciary end?
That's my understanding, yes.
Thank you.
So just for the listening audience, can you explain the acronym of VVCH?
It stands for Virtual Criminal Crime History. Virtual Criminal Crime History.
Okay, just wanted to make
Computerized,
sure.
yes.
So I'm just wanting to make sure that based on that, because a defendant or the detainee or the prisoner, there are incidents that can happen, because if you're looking at the 3 signatures needed and that's been approved, and then something comes back and saying, no, that there's an updated, then the lack of information provided from whatever the latest case is based on that defendant having 3 or 4 more cases could be the reason why the prisoner or the detainee was released.
Yes, yes,
And-
Senator.
But that wasn't was that the issue on this, on the 2 really illegal or erroneous releases?
Yes, Senator. There were commitment orders on one case and releases on other cases. And so it was an oversight on the officer not paying attention to detail and just missing it. It happens,
Okay.
Can you just clarify, was the VCCH down during these incidents, or were you not using them at all yet?
Okay, during these instances of erroneous release, we were not using the VCCH.
Okay. So when was that implemented?
The VCCH only came into effect, I think it was the end of August. I think, when we started using it.
Okay, thank you. Was it down before that, or this was a new procedure that was added to correct these issues?
No, the VCCH, there was some, and again, I can't speak on the side of the computer because I'm not a computer tech, but it was some issues between our system and the courts and DOA. There was some connectivity issues, and they were trying to work on it for months to get it to figure it out and what was wrong. And again, I don't know all the specifics of it, but it was brought up several times, and they were, again, finally got it working in August, and then it went down again, and now it's back running again.
So maybe for most of this year, it wasn't being used.
For for these particular cases, it was not being used.
Upon implementation of the VCCH, when did DOC first start using VCCH system?
We've been using it in the past 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah, because we could access it, but again, there's a long period of time when we could not access it.
So 2015 or 2014?
I can't recall the exact date, but I know it was been a while that we were able to use it. We got it running. We trained our staff, but then again, it went down, and we again, maybe 2015. It's been a while.
Okay, so you implemented it, give or take 2014, 2015, right? When did it go down? What year did the VCCH go down?
Ma'am, Senator, I can't recall exactly, but I do know it was down for a while.
A while, like a year, 2 years?
We probably couldn't access it for maybe more than 2 years.
And so what was the issue that brought it back online? What did you have to fix to bring it back online?
We're not the one that brought it back online. It was the courts. We let them know we have a problem. They work with DOA, OTEC, and it was between the firewalls and other issues there, but we personally, I had nothing to do with it, and neither did any of our staff. We just let them know, and they work out their issues there.
So in 2017, give or take, you informed the judiciary that the VCCH was down. It was only able to come up this year in 2019 of August?
Yes. In the Agana area, we could still access it up at Manila at the visitation, but we could not access it in Agana. And that's where our processing place is at.
Right. So it was not a priority at that time. It didn't start to become a priority till August.
Well, it's just another tool that we use, but I'll let you know, Senator, too, that's not a perfect either, because the VCCH tool is not a perfect tool to identify. We still have to rely on our database.
Right.
We still have to rely on our tool database.
Right.
We still have to rely on opening the file and looking at the inmate's jacket to make sure. So even with that VCCH, it is not a solve-all to identifying the proper inmates, because it doesn't even have photos. It just has little case histories. And again, it's just another tool that we are using to help us in our job. But it's not a solve-all. It's not a perfect system.
So I'm getting the impression that it's insignificant then. It's insignificant?
No, I mean, we are using it as a tool, but I don't want to make it sound like it's going to fix all the problems with our system, with what the different court cases and stuff, but we are using it as a tool. That doesn't replace us to also open up the jacket, open up the file, and double check and cross check, make sure that there's no other cases pending.
Okay. Go ahead.
So during the time that the VCCH was down, was there any procedure that was done to perhaps call the court to verify while the actual software was down?
No, ma'am. Again, by the time we release these inmates, the court is closed.
All right, but according to your procedure, the way you're supposed to check whether they have another case is to open the AS400 system and the HDF database system. So was that done in the 4 cases?
Yes, it was.
So it's just but in one of the cases, you said that they overlooked the second case or secondary case. So was it like an error in looking through these 2 systems? If they did look through the systems then?
So in the first case, ma'am, Senator, there was, in the first particular case we're talking about, there was 2 case numbers. So in that particular situation, he was released on 1 case number, but the other case number he was committed.
Right.
I believe the officer didn't know about the other case.
Right, but he's supposed to know by looking through the AS400 system and the HDF database system. Is that correct, Major?
Yes, they're supposed to be uploaded into the database system.
Right. So that's it's like a triple check, right? To see whether there's another case. You could either use the VCCH system, but that was down. So there are two other backups. You check the AS400 or the HDF database. And so you're saying that that was done in this case, but they still overlooked the secondary case. So I just want to know how that happens. You search by name. I mean, how did that ever happen? How do you overlook a second case if you're using two databases, two systems?
Well, I cannot speak for what the officer was looking at and what he saw or did not see at the time he was doing the clearing. From my experience, I also do the clearing, and I do clear for releases. And so I do open up both systems. I look for the cases that are cleared releases. One system we can upload files to, the other system we cannot. One system has mugshots, the other system does not. One system you can search by case number, the other system you only search by name or social security or date of birth. And so that officer has to be attentive to detail when he's looking at these documents and just paying attention to what's in front of him. Again, if he's not paying attention, he will miss something, and in this case, that's what happened. He missed the number, and he released him, and the other officer came in, because they weren't, after they did the clearing, they go in later and they start inputting it into the system. We don't have a data to key in as we're doing all this work. They come back later, they put the paper there, another officer will come in later and start keying it in the next shift. When it was being keyed in.
After the release.
After
But
the release?
I'm only talking
Yes.
about prior to the
Right.
release. So what about, on your checklist prior to release, it also says you're supposed to look at the prisoner file folder. That's what you're referring to as the jacket, right? And so in there, you have a line here that it's supposed to have the active commitment orders. So shouldn't all the jackets have active commitment orders for all cases?
Again, yes, the inmate's jacket would have all their court documents inside, or legal documents. It could be a parole warrant or
So
what
even
have
if
you.
there are two cases, you would see it in the prisoner's jacket
You should, yes.
file folder?
Yes.
All right. So that's like 1, 2, 3, that's a fourth kind of backup, right? The manual system, we call it in our law office, but, all right. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Sorry, and on this checklist, I see the AS400 and then the HDF database, yes or no, but there's no VCCH to check here.
So as I mentioned earlier, in April of this year, we weren't utilizing the VCCH.
Okay.
It was after the April incidents that happened that I reached out to the judiciary and had them come in and check our systems as well as train our personnel so that they could utilize that system.
Okay,
And
I
so-
thought I remembered you
Yes, ma'am.
mentioning it. So will this be updated to include that?
Yes, ma'am, it has updated. The Vice Speaker has it. We provided her with our, in her request, her FOIA request, we gave her all the copies how we've evolved.
Okay, got
Yes,
it.
ma'am.
The most recent. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Shelton. Senator Moylan?
Thank you. Major, you were mentioning the next person that came on in and reviewed the paperwork started entering. Is that how the error was discovered? If you can expand on that, please.
Yes, so after he was cleared for release and released, the officer came in and was started to key it into the system and update the files. When he came across, he noticed the case numbers, and in his inquiry, he started saying, how come this, he started just asking questions, and that's when they found out, he had another case that was holding him. That's how they discovered the mistake.
Okay, thank you. Colonel, how many inmates, from your time or your experience, maybe what you can recall, how many inmates do you release like last year, if you can recall that?
We process about 5,000 releases.
That's like an average
Approximate, yes.
annual release. Director, you were saying the release was based on human error. Just wondering if this officer, and you were explaining that understaffed previously and so forth. I'm just wondering if was this person responsible on regular overtime? Was there the person is he working like 90 hours a week or every 2 weeks, or how does this work with your staff on overtime there?
And so when we came on board, we implemented a 34-hour cap for overtime for all officers so that there wouldn't be as much burnout because of how much overtime there is, as well as how much work that everybody performs. In this particular incident, you're asking about the supervisor on duty. How much overtime had she worked? I don't know that offhand, Senator, at this time.
Okay. Thank you. You determined that it was human error. Can you share with us the explanation from the responsible party there?
I'd have to defer to Major Uggan because he was the individual that met with the responsible, and if he can answer that, sir.
Senator, can you repeat the question, please?
I'm understanding that this was a human error, and I'm sure you interviewed. Can you share with us the explanation from the responsible person?
Okay, so again, I don't have all three reports in front of me regarding the exact details of everything that happened, because there were several of them. But one of the officers, of course, I did call him in and asked him what happened. I saw the documents. I needed him to explain how he could miss that. I mean, I saw it. I mean, I don't know how he missed it, but again, he was very sorry about it. He was the only officer there doing the processing and the booking and releasing, so he was doing both jobs. He was tired. He was exhausted. He was in a hurry to get them released. It's getting almost, I think, 10 o'clock in the evening. He's trying to get them out, and he's not paying attention to detail, and he's rushing the process instead of slowing down and doing it the right way. And he overlooked it. As simple as that. He overlooked it. He's been doing releases. This is not his first time doing releases. He's probably done hundreds of them. But on this particular day, he was just not paying attention to detail, and he missed it.
So just to follow up, Madam Chair, if I may, because you're saying that he missed the detail, but before any release is done, shouldn't the signatures be in order, that everything is cleared and updated? So this would be like a triple check process, wouldn't it?
Yes, Senator.
So if the 3 signatures were on and it was erroneous, I'm trying to find a justification. That's why I asked earlier, could it be because there may be 1, 2, or 3 more cases additional to a release versus a confinement order or a rescindment? So, but to blame a guard, I'm asking, don't you need, if an officer saw that the signatures were cleared, wouldn't that also be a sign that everything was checked, or no?
Yes, Senator. The officer, the main officer that started the process of clearing him, and the other officers involved, they were all held responsible for their role in not catching this before releasing him. And so they were all 3 of them were, brought in and
Cited.
sanctioned, counseled.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Speaker Barnes.
Oh, thank you. May I?
Okay.
Thank you. Colonel, you mentioned 5,000 releases annually on average. Correct, Colonel? 5,000?
Yes, Senator.
Right. So is that you release daily? Or is it?
I mean, there are times where we release one night, 17 prisoners.
Right. If I just average that out, that's like 13 a day, if it's 7 days a week on an average.
Well, give or
right?
take, yes, sir.
Give or take.
That's all day.
Okay. And plus you're also intaking. I
Yes, sir.
suppose. And when you,
As we're processing, that loan officer processing or releasing, we have the Guam Police Department knocking on our door,
We want
trying to
more
gain
in,
that one officer's attention to. So there, it becomes really hectic for that one hub officer to get all this information and really vet it out and screen it and make the right decisions. So it's very stressful just being that. So moving on, we added another officer, their extra eyes, to aid in that, because again, those eyes can get really tired after reviewing documents all day and processing.
so your intake, if we're releasing 5,000 annually, your intake annually is, do you have an,
Yes,
can you
off
give
the
me an
charts.
idea? Off the
Close,
charts.
close the same amount.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Manager.
Vice Speaker, if I may. I would like to ask the panel to forgive me. I have to leave for a family commitment that I cannot miss. I have about 9 questions as it relates to SORT, internal affairs, and some other questions, and I'm hoping that my colleagues could help share that, and then I could get the response later. But I think this is really important, and I just want to try and get a better idea. I want to thank the Vice Speaker for holding this oversight and bringing to our listening audience, our residents, that these things are very serious, they're very critical, but we're hoping that we can get the answers to the questions. So, Madam Chair, thank you very much for following through for me.
Process. All right, can I just ask then, all right, so on your checklist, you have the 3 officers that are supposed to sign, but your directions say that the hub officer and unit officer's responsibility to ensure there are no pending cases or detainers on the prisoner to be released, and that it's the platoon commander substantiates that all of the above sections had been checked thoroughly, then it will be the responsibility of the platoon commander to clear the prisoner for release. Does that mean that he just checks whether all the boxes are completed and then is that his responsibility? So it's the 2 officers that are checking, they're the ones who are marking the above.
Yes, okay, so the clearing takes place in Agana, at the Agana Detention Facility. The platoon commander is stationed in Manila. That's where the supervisor is at, not in Agana, in Manila.
Okay.
So when this document, when the release order comes in, the officer breaks out the release checklist, goes through it, the system, right? When they're done and they've done all their due diligence, they fax it to Manila. Then the supervisor up in Manila will look at the document and it's to go into the system.
Wait, the hub officer does that in Agana, right?
Yes.
So then who in Manila?
And then they fax this,
Yes,
the cover sheet to
Manila,
Manila.
right?
And then the commander will go into the systems.
The platoon commander.
The platoon commander and kind of cross-check.
So he's supposed to go into the systems himself?
Yes.
All right, what about the unit officer? Where is he?
Depends. If the unit officer, if the inmate being released is from Manila or Agana, then it'll be, their files will be down there.
Let's say Manila.
Then the inmate in the housing unit would have a jacket with the commitment order and paperwork in the housing unit in Manila.
Right. So
Right.
who gets it? Who goes and gets the jacket?
It'll be in the housing unit, the unit officer that's assigned at the unit.
The unit officer at Manila, normally.
Again, it depends on, I don't have the reports of,
Are there unit officers in Agana also?
yes, but Agana and Manila are 2 separate facilities. They're 2 different facilities.
All right,
So
but you said that all release orders come through Agana, right?
that's the processing area, yes.
Yeah, so it's processed by hub officers are always in Agana.
Yes.
And then the papers, I'm talking about somebody who's at Manila, a prisoner, all right? So then they're faxed to Manila, and the unit officer is up there, or no, where's the unit officer?
There'll be a unit officer up in Manila.
All right, and so he's the one who's going to grab the jacket, and he's also supposed to verify everything that was just verified in Agana, correct?
At least, yes, to open up the file and see. Now, the unit officer doesn't have the computer. They don't have the computer. They don't have any of that. So they just look at the jacket of what's in front of them in the folder. They don't have computer. They don't have anything.
So if the unit officer doesn't have the computer, does the platoon officer have, the platoon commander have the computer?
There is a computer up there for the platoon commander to access.
There is a computer at Manilao, but the unit officers can't access it.
Not the unit officers in Manila, no.
I see.
They don't have internet.
So, ma'am, when we talk about unit officer, it means in a post.
Yeah.
If you're at post 8 in the female unit, or if you're at post 5 or post 6, that's a post that's separate from our central office. So there's no computers in those units. So that's why he's referencing to the unit manager that's handling that unit or that post at that time.
All right, and then the converse must be also true, that the person in Agana does not have the physical jacket, the file, because those are up at Manila. So we've got the person in Agana reviewing the two database. He's the only person reviewing the databases. And then there's one person, the unit officer, who should be checking the jacket. Is this really? So your form is a little bit misleading, because it looks like all three of them are verifying those information, but that's not really happening. There's no cross-check on who's, well, I guess unless the platoon officer is going to go in and do all of those things, so Major, you've said that that's their job, is to go in again and review the database, but this just says he's supposed to substantiate that the above sections had been checked and then release. Does checked mean he's going to check it himself, or checked in, put a check mark next to it, whether they have check marks? What is your understanding of the platoon commander's actual responsibility?
They have to verify that what was written here, that the officer checked it, and that to cross-check the system to make sure that that officer didn't miss anything. So when I clear, again, that's exactly what I do. I get this form, and I go into the system, and I cross-check, make sure, double-check, and then I sign the bottom, that I checked all this stuff up here, and there is also, so I'm like a second eyes to the first officer that did it.
Right, okay. And does the platoon commander have the jacket also?
The jacket would be in the unit, yes.
So it stays in the unit. Only one person reviews the jacket, right?
Yes.
The file, the physical file. All right. We got that right?
I believe so, ma'am, but in the cases that we're discussing that happened in Agana, so the files were in Agana. So, but yes, I believe what you're saying is true.
Okay, let's just, everything is clear as mud after all this information we've been given. So let's start at the basics. Who was the first inmate erroneous released this year? And what was the timeline when the court order came in and upon release?
So, and your question is, who was the first one? You want us to,
Yes.
a detainee's name, ma'am?
Yes, it says it in the news, so I think it's public information now.
So, detainee Johnson Simon on April 17.
Okay.
So in this particular situation, ma'am, it was a commitment order and not a release order.
Okay. So a commitment order came for the inmate Johnson Simon and not a release order. How did we get that confused between a release order and a commitment order? How do we confuse that?
Ma'am, excuse me. At this point, based on our conversation and what we've addressed to you, the situation is factual that it was an oversight on the officer's part.
Okay. What time did the commitment order come in for Johnson Simon? No, it was a commitment order. It was not a release order that came in for Johnson Simon. It was a commitment order that came in for Johnson Simon. So the question was, how did you confuse it? It was an oversight, is what it was stated. So what time did that commitment order come in on April 17th for Johnson Simon? Major Uggan, you seem like the person that is familiar with this process, and I'm thinking that you also oversee the platoon commander. Do you know the timeline?
Senator, I don't have the reports in front of me. That's why because there's, you're talking about several different releases, so I don't want to misspoke on the timeline. I don't have the report in front of me to give you the correct information.
Okay.
And that's correct as well. Ma'am, I don't have the
Okay.
full report on exactly when that order was provided to DOC.
So we just know that the commitment order came in on April 17, 2019. At what time was this inmate erroneous released?
Trying to figure this out.
On April 17th, he was erroneously released at 22:35 hours.
Okay. And at what time did Department of Corrections realize that it was an actual commitment order and not a release order?
On April 18 at 02:35 a.m.
At what time? Now, what is the notification process? And it appears it appears that this erroneous release happened on the same shift, right? Because your shifts run from what, 17:30? Is it 17? What time do your shifts run? Your change shift?
I believe at that time it was 17:30. Currently, it's 12 to 12.
Okay. So at that time, it was 17:30 to
05:30.
05:30. Thank you, Warden. So we realized that we released this inmate at 02:35 a.m. What is the notification to the leadership? What is the notification process to make the leadership aware that this inmate was erroneously released?
So there's a protocol in place
Okay.
that should something happen, then the officer, the central officer will contact myself, the deputy director, the warden, and Major Uggan, and inform us of the situation.
Okay. The central officer is something different, is another person other than the platoon commander. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so the platoon commander will have to notify the central officer.
Somebody would have notified the central controls, yes, ma'am.
Was it the platoon commander that realized that there was an erroneous release?
In this particular instance, no, ma'am, it was one of the initial officers at the hub that noticed that recognized his mistake.
Okay. So the hub officer informed the platoon commander? Or did the hub officer jump the chain and go all the way up to the central officer?
I'm not aware. I'm not aware of that. I don't have that information, ma'am.
Can you get us this information?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So now that the central officer is in charge, at what time was, I'm thinking it goes up the chain of command, so the central officer will report to you, right, Warden?
Senator, upon the discovery of our erroneous release, that also will contact central control up at the main facility.
Okay.
And then alert the platoon commander on duty. Then the platoon commander will do the protocol, alerting myself, Major Uggan, our deputy, and our director.
Okay. At what time was Major Uggan informed? At what time were you informed? And at what time was the director informed?
I can't recollect, but immediately upon discovery of that, they will call me at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I mean, immediately. And again, if I'm not attentive to my phone, I don't catch it until I wake up, and then I see the release.
So you
the
were
erroneous release.
contacted?
Yes, ma'am.
What time were you contacted?
If the release was around 2, shortly after, because that's the protocol.
And what was your guidance?
Well, that time I said gather all the information. By the time I get into work, I want to review it.
What time did you get into work?
I can't recollect, maybe 6 in the morning, because I wake up early, but not that early. And when I woke up and I saw the message, I immediately called in what's going on, and then they briefed me and I said, get all the reports, so when I come in, I can review and take the next course of action.
So, ma'am, if I may, so at 2:35, the officer noticed that there was an error, that there was an erroneous release. At 3:35 a.m., same date, 2 of our officers went out and picked up the individual and brought him and took him back into confinement.
How did they know where to find the individual?
I think I was the one, right? That was me?
Bruce
Okay.
JJ, and you were the one before.
Okay.
Ma'am, I'm perhaps based on his demographics that we had in our file, that they went back out. They may have contacted him and let him know, and then they picked him up in that particular case.
At what time were you notified of this erroneous release, this very first one?
This is the second one. The first one was actually on April 11th, so this is the second one. This is the April 17th incident.
Okay,
ma'am.
I asked you about the first one first. I wanted to go to the first one.
Okay. So,
So-
I said Johnson Simon, that was the second one. But
Okay.
the first one was actually on April 11th.
Okay.
But in this particular one, I would say I was notified.
Who's in charge of notifying you, Director?
Or Central, ma'am.
Central.
Yes, they would have given me a call.
Who's in charge at Central?
Whoever the platoon commander is on duty, ma'am.
Okay. So, the very first incident on April 11th, is this a different inmate?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. In that particular one, the inmate there is detainee JJBR.
Okay.
He was released on April 11th at 23:44 hours.
And at what time did you,
On April 12th, at 05:39 hours, the officer noticed in that particular one that there was erroneous release.
0538?
5:39 a.m., correct.
0539 a.m. So at what time were you notified of this erroneous release? Were you notified on the same day?
In my recollection, I believe I was notified early morning. I don't know offhand, but in that particular one, I was notified that morning.
By who?
Central Control. And then same date at 7:20 hours, the detainee was taken back into custody.
Okay. And both of these detainees are out of the Gagno precinct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So this jacket that we speak of, that is at the post at Department of Corrections, how does that play a role in your checklist if they're at a Gagno precinct?
The hub officer would have access to that jacket, and so they should have been reviewing it, ma'am.
If the prisoner's in Agana.
Yes, ma'am.
So the jacket is in a Gagno precinct?
If they're the detainee and they're down in Agana, then yes, the jacket should be. In both cases, that.
Warden, please turn on your mic. Thank you.
Sorry. Wherever the prisoner goes, the jacket follows.
Okay.
Okay.
So, if I am the hub officer and I am stationed at a Gagno precinct, I have access to every item that is on this checklist that I must review and ensure that is accurate. Is that correct?
That's correct, ma'am.
And if I'm the unit officer and I'm at a Ganya precinct and my inmate is at a Ganya precinct, I have access to every item that I must check off and review. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And if I'm the platoon commander, do I have access to every item that I must check off and review?
The platoon commander wouldn't have access to the file, ma'am, but they'd have access to the computer system, the AS400 and the HDF, the Naviline.
Does that have all the information I need to release the inmate?
I want to say yes, ma'am, but in reality, our systems are only as good as what's uploaded. And so if everything was properly uploaded, then yes, ma'am, it should have.
So, when you did your investigation, was everything uploaded at the time the platoon commander was verifying these checks?
Major?
Did we bother to check if everything was uploaded when the platoon commander verified these checks?
Okay, so when the document went to Manila, the platoon commander, platoon commander did not have immediate access to the system. Okay, so they weren't able to actually go in and verify those information.
Which system are you talking about?
The HDF database and the Naviline. They had access to it, they could use it, but they didn't, since this, one of the things we did since this happened, of course, was train our supervisors more on how to use the system.
When you say immediate access, Major Uggan, what do you mean by immediate access? Does that mean that the system was down? Or does that mean that I didn't go into the system to check?
The two systems at the time that were working were the computers in central control that would have access to the Naviline. But since this happened, we put the other two computers in the operations area for the supervisors to have immediate access to it.
Where's central control?
That's when you walk into the main adult correctional facility in Manila.
In Manila.
In Manila.
Where's the platoon commander stationed?
The platoon commander has an office adjacent over by the warden's office, but sometimes, again, because the platoon commander could be moving around, she could be at one of the housing units or somewhere else within the compound. They don't really stay in an office.
Okay, so is there a timeline required to DOC by law saying that if you receive an order, you must release the detainee or inmate at a specific time?
No.
Okay. So if the platoon commander is also in Manilao and Central that has these systems are in Manilao, what prohibited the immediate access to get these to go and look into the system?
Say again?
So you don't have a timeline upon
Right.
that is required to you by law that you must release an inmate,
Right.
So it's not something that, if you're dealing with an emergency, if I'm the platoon commander and I'm dealing with an emergency, a DOC or an issue, that's going to take precedence before I have to sit down and look at these docs, right? To
Right.
verify. And you said that in Central Command, that the system, the AS400 and HDF system, is in Central Command,
Right.
which is located in Manilao.
Right.
And me as a platoon commander, I'm also stationed in Manilao.
Right.
So what prohibits me from having immediate access from going to Central Command in the same location I am stationed at? Because
Again,
you stated that the platoon commander did not have immediate access.
Again, when the platoon commander is on duty, there is 18 different housing units, right? So when these paperworks get up there, the platoon commander may not be available at that particular point to even look at the documents. They may be at the other unit, somewhere on the compound. And so after they make their rounds and they head back down to central control, right, then that's when they would see the documents, right?
So-
and then verify it through central control's computer that these are that this is being done.
Right, but you just said that the platoon commander did not have immediate access to these systems.
What we discovered when I questioned the lieutenant on why this didn't happen, she said that she could not access it because her password, something was locking her on the system, which I didn't know. But immediately I corrected the problem, I set her down, I redid the password and set her up for it.
How do you log into the system?
You have a username and a password.
Okay, and then if I forget my password, what happens?
If you try more than 2 times, it'll lock you out.
And what do I need to do to get unlocked?
Myself or the caseworker would be the ones to, I have to go into the department. I have to actually go to work and get into the system because I cannot access it from my residence. I would have to go in and actually reset her password.
So, is it on both of these cases she forgot her password?
No, not on both of them. I mean, again, I can't explain for her on all her reasons why she didn't do her due diligence, but I know on one of them she did not have access, so we immediately took care of that problem.
Which one was it, the first or the second
The
incident?
first one.
So the first one, she did not have access to her password.
Yeah.
So how did she realize that she made the error between 2344 and 0539 the next day? How did she realize she made the error if she could not access the password? Did you go to DOC and unlock her password?
She's not the one that recognized the error.
Who was the
The officer who actually released it is the one that recognized the error.
Which officer was that?
The officer in Agana who cleared the person originally.
Okay.
When he was now going in to update the system and double check, that's when he came across that he made a mistake.
So she signed a commitment order thinking it was a release order without looking into the system.
That would be my guess.
Did you not have an investigation on this issue? So why are we guessing?
Yeah, she didn't look at it. She didn't look at it.
So she just decided to sign.
She signed it, yes.
And it was stated that you gave a letter of reprimand to the individual.
Yes.
Okay. So the one that forgot their password was the platoon commander.
Right.
And in both instances, on April 11 and April 17, the most senior ranking officer on the signatory form is the platoon commander. And that is the one in common.
Yes.
So what was the issue for the erroneous release on April 18th, April 17th to April 18th when Johnson Simon was released? The first one was the password. So she just signed off on it anyway because she couldn't access the system. Did you double check to see if she was able to access the system?
Yes.
So you went into the logs of the computer and see if she tried to make an effort to access the system?
Right, I did. And she
Do
could
you have
not.
documentation
And she
that
couldn't.
validates that? Did
No,
you
because
print out the logs?
I
of the
don't have any
computer system?
document, ma'am, but when you go into the system and you go into her account, it'll say disabled. It'll show disabled.
Okay.
And so all I have to do is do enabled and then put reset and reset it, and then she's good to go.
How often does she go? How often do you have to update your password?
The password, I believe maybe 3 months.
Every 3 months.
Give or take, yes.
When do you update the password? Is it a quarterly update? Or what I'm trying to understand is, how long did she have that password?
Again, the commanders, ma'am, again, because there's different shifts, different commanders do different times.
Right.
One commander may only sign off on 2 or 3 releases in a month. So they don't really access this. It's not an everyday where they're constantly, being the one there. Because if I'm there, for example, I would do it. I would clear it, right? If I'm not there and she's there or another commander is there, then they would do it. But they're not doing it every day. It's not an everyday thing.
So how many people has she released from January to April 11th?
I'm not sure. I can't recall.
Can I get that? Is it possible that we get that number? I'm surprised that's not part of the investigation process.
We'd have to do some research, but ma'am, we'd look into it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm surprised that we wouldn't want to find out how many people or how many inmates or detainees she has released after these 2 erroneous releases. And then, But my question wasn't answered. How long did she have this password?
I don't know.
Can we get that also? So you have to go into the system logs and you have to find out how long the password was in there and when it was updated. Okay. On April 17, what happened there? How did we do another erroneous release? And it's the same individual?
Again, Senator, I cannot really brief you. I don't have the reports in front of me.
So, Vice Speaker, if I may, in the second incident, the first incident was a commitment order and not a release order, as we discussed. The second one, this individual had multiple cases. So there was 2 felony cases, only one was overlooked. There was a release order in one, there was a commitment in the other.
Okay. So this time, the senior ranking officer was able to open the AS400, the HDF, and the VCCH.
In April, not the VCCH,
Not the VCH,
ma'am.
just the AS400 and HDF.
Based on what Major Uggan responded, that her password was corrected, then I would believe so, ma'am.
So how did we make that mistake? A second oversight?
I'm sorry, Senator, can you repeat your question?
I'm trying to understand. I understand the complexity of having multiple cases, right? You have one that's open and one that's closed. So perhaps there's some confusion. But she had access to these systems, which has the documents uploaded in there. Let me ask you this. After the first erroneous release, what was the action taken for all the officers?
The officers were given a reprimand.
Letter of reprimand. What else did you give them?
The supervisor was given a training
Okay.
on how to access the system and redid her password and showed her how to get into the system.
So the leadership did the necessary corrective action, right? You found, okay, maybe she forgot her password, and maybe now she needs to be retrained. All the officers are retrained so we don't have this mistake again. So the second time, how was this mistake committed if you trained her? Was she trained properly?
Yes, Senator, she was trained. Again, I cannot speak for why she didn't see the documents or what, I wasn't there to see why she didn't see it. She didn't see the other document.
Okay. And all the documents are there, right? You can just either
Yes.
tab it through or look it over, right? And you're able to see these documents.
Yes.
And what was the actions taken on the officers for this erroneous release?
The second release involved the same supervisor, but other officers, different officers. So they were given a reprimand.
What was the reason that Johnson Simon was detained? What was his crime?
I don't recall. I don't have his file in front of me.
I don't have that information.
Okay. Why was only a letter of reprimand given to the most senior ranking officer who committed a similar mistake after he or she was trained? Who is the one that counsels the senior ranking officer? Who in the chain of command counsels the senior ranking officer? Counsel meaning giving him or her the expectations, If they do something wrong, I'm gonna explain to you what you did wrong, and I'm gonna provide you with the tools and resources so that you don't make the same mistake? Who is the one that does that? Who is the supervisor?
I'm I'm the primary, because I'm the operations commander.
Are you the one that wrote the senior ranking officer the letter of reprimand?
I wrote the letter of reprimand, yes.
Both times?
Yes.
What was the reason for the second letter of reprimand? Why did you feel that a letter of reprimand was sufficient after the second time?
That was discussed amongst management, and the decision was to give them a reprimand.
Who's the management? Whose ultimate decision was it to give a letter of reprimand? You said it was discussed upon management. Was this like in your command staff meeting, or?
Yeah, it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was at the time, our deputy director.
The deputy director
Right.
recommended that she get a letter of reprimand the second time that it was done.
Right.
Do you have minutes during your commanded staff meetings? Or do you guys just come together and?
No minutes, no minutes, ma'am.
Is that standard for a corrections facility to have a command staff meeting with no minutes?
I don't know what the standard is. Currently, when we have a staff meeting, we have an agenda, and we try and follow the agenda. So I do prepare an agenda for our meetings.
I think it would behoove you to start implementing some kind of documentation and record keeping.
Yes, ma'am.
So what was the reasoning? Was there a reasoning given by the deputy director to give this individual a second letter of reprimand and maybe not an adverse action?
Again, with the adverse action, ma'am, the way we handled this in the past, when an erroneous release, the cover memo would go from the warden to the director, requesting for an internal affairs investigation. As that internal affairs investigation happens, when that's done, their document is given to the director for the director's disposition on what action she feels is necessary, whether it be a suspension, reprimand, or termination.
Okay. So the deputy director at the time recommended a second letter of reprimand. But now you're saying that after you decide on the consequence, the adverse action, it goes up to the director. And the director is the ultimate deciding authority. Did you get this documentation, this letter of reprimand, these things that is part of procedure that Major Uggan just mentioned?
If I recall, I did not receive anything from the warden on a cover letter, sir. I don't believe there was a cover letter from the warden in that particular case. And in my discussion with the former 02, he wanted to move forward on some disciplinary action other than a letter of reprimand, and I advised him to prepare his memo to move it forward to me so that I could move forward and meet with our staff attorney and work towards proposed adverse action.
And did you do that?
Unfortunately, I did not receive the letter in that particular case, I did not receive the memo at the time.
Did you ever receive a memo recommending that another different action should be given?
I did receive, I did get a copy of the memo, but it was after the fact, ma'am, that I did receive it.
How far after the fact?
I believe 2 months after the fact. I'm not quite sure, but I'm going to say 4 to 6 weeks, maybe.
So have you updated it? Have you updated the actions taken towards the senior ranking officer? Have you updated it, the actions recommended, or once you issued out the letter of reprimand, that's it? You can't do another action on the officer?
At the time, ma'am, the time had lapsed, so I was unable to move forward with any proposed adverse action.
So what is the timeline before it lapses?
The 60 days I believe the 60 days had already passed.
So the warden didn't send you anything, the deputy director didn't send you anything, so how did you acquire the memo?
So in July of this year, we had a FOIA request from one of the news media, and they were requesting for these individuals and what happened. And so in response to the FOIA, I asked for the files to be retrieved so that I could prepare our timely response. And my staff looked for the documents, and eventually it was found in an office, and then was given to me so that I could prepare my timely response to the FOIA request.
So the time has lapsed for you to do any additional corrective measures to this officer that is significant other than a letter of reprimand is when you discovered this file?
Yes, ma'am.
How did you discover the file?
My
Was
staff actually discovered the file when they were looking for the files, the actual files on this, so that we could move forward with the FOIA request.
So the deputy director did send the memo over to you.
No, ma'am.
How did your staff discover the file?
They located the documents in an envelope in in an office, in his office, and then that's when it was brought to my attention.
What did you do when you realized the time has lapsed and the deputy director never gave you the official documentation? What did you do to the deputy director? As a director, what is your authority?
Once I received it, I believe I had words of him that it was delayed. And actually, ma'am, I don't recall if I had a conversation with him at the time.
Did you discuss it with the warden?
No, I don't believe. Basically, what happened, and when we reviewing the what was found, it would show there was 2 letter reprimands that were done for the first and for the second, and the time had lapsed, so there was nothing that I could do further. So both of those letter reprimands were made copies and were sent on to the Department of Administration and held in the jacket, in their personnel jackets down at DOA.
Warden Major Uggan, why isn't in an earlier statement the director mentioned that erroneous releases happened last term, but she went to look for the documents and the files and actions taken for this erroneous release, and she could not find any. Why was it not documented? The erroneous releases that happened in February 2018, March 2018. Why is there no file at Department of Corrections of the incidents that occurred there? Was an investigation done?
Ma'am, I cannot recall. I don't remember what specific incident. I know there was something that happened in 2018, but I can't remember all the specifics of the case or what happened to it.
What is the procedure when you erroneous release someone? Where do you put those files? Do you just throw them anywhere on a desk, or do you put them away in a filing cabinet? And
Again, the procedure that we've followed in the past, when there's an erroneous releases, all the reports are gathered. All the reports are gathered, given to the warden. The warden will put a cover memo, forward it to the director for her disposition, recommending an internal affairs investigation be conducted.
right.
Okay, it would be in the internal affairs office,
Okay.
where the files are kept.
Okay. So in 2018, it was another director there. Where are the records of those erroneous releases that happened in 2018?
Those case files should be in internal affairs in one of the file cabinets.
Did you look in internal affairs in one of the file cabinets?
I did inquire with Major Uggan if we had anything, and I did check with my internal affairs, and they did not locate anything.
Warden, do you know where these documents are? Because he mentioned that it goes through your chain to the director.
Yes, ma'am. Again, when we have these kind of erroneous releases, we just we gather all the reports, put it covered, and recommend internal affairs intervention to look into the matter.
So do I have to FOIA for February and March for these documents to be found on the erroneous release?
Ma'am, tomorrow morning when I get into the office, I will do my due diligence and we will readdress this and look for those files if there's any, if it does exist.
Okay. Because do you know which officers were involved in March 2018 and February 2018? Is there any record of that?
It would be in the document. I cannot recall.
I guess I'm having a hard time understanding, sir, not being able to recall significant events. Does this happen often at DOC that we don't know about, that it happens so frequent we don't recall significant events?
Again, I don't, you're asking me for names and I don't know. I mean, I don't have the reports, I don't know. So I can't tell you anything if I don't remember.
I'm not asking
I
for
mean,
names.
a lot of things happen in DOC, a lot of things happen, and I can't recall every single event, when it happened or who was involved. I would need to see the reports.
Right. I understand that. But it was only documented through the media in 2018, 2 erroneous releases, February and March. So it was all over the news. And then the director saying she can't find the files. And she discussed it with you. And you weren't able to give her the files.
Okay, I'm not at Internal Affairs, so I don't have access to any of the files from previous administrations. I'm located inside the Manila compound. So when the director asked me about it, I told her I can recall something happening, but I don't know all the other facts because I have no reports. I don't have the IA files, I don't have the cover memo, I don't have any of that. I didn't prepare any of it. So I told her, I said, I will check in my record, my hard drive, what I have about erroneous releases. All I came up with was the article. Okay, the article that it happened, but I don't have any of the case files, I don't have any of the memos, I don't have any of the notes, so I don't really know all the specific of what happened. I cannot recall what all happened.
Okay. Was there any erroneous releases in 2017?
I'm unaware, ma'am, if there was any.
How do you access these internal affairs files to know what occurred in the past and how to fix these situations in the future?
I will have my internal affairs officer that's currently there look into the files. There's numerous files over the course of a few years for any incidents that have occurred, and we'll have to go through each and every file and review it and find it. If I'm not necessarily he accessed the files, I asked him if he knew anything as well when I talked to Major Uggan, and he said he doesn't recall any of that. So all we had was the copies of the news media. And so tomorrow, as I said, I will ask my internal affairs to look into it and see if there's anything from last year.
Can we go back as far as 2014?
Ma'am, I will, whatever we have in our internal affairs, we will do our due diligence to look at everything and see what we have.
Okay. You have any questions on the erroneous releases? Senator Telena.
All right, just want to clarify a couple of things. So first you told us that 5,000 releases are processed per year, but that the platoon commander, and there's always one on duty, right? And only one platoon commander at a time. But that the platoon commander that was on duty on the night of the 2 releases had not processed many and was not, I guess, trained to research on the computer for these, the detainees' files? Is that correct?
After the incident, we did retrain her, if you will, on how to use the system and try to determine whether or not there's a case holding the person.
All right. And you said that they faxed documents from Hagåtña up to Manila, and that would include the order of release, right? From the court, if there's
Right.
one. And did both of these cases have an order of release from the court? Is that how it started? Did the marshals bring an order of release, or was it
Yes,
some-
that's what starts the process. Is
Okay.
we don't even look at a file until the court document comes in and it says release.
Okay.
That's when the process begins.
All right, but would the platoon commander who's up at Manila be able to see that order of release? Are they supposed to look at that?
If they access the system, yes, they should be able to see it in the system.
I thought you said some documents were faxed,
They fax up the checklist.
the checklist,
Yeah.
but what about the order? No?
At times, yeah, they will fax up all of the documents to the platoon commander.
Okay, because it's only the order that's going to show commitment versus release order, right? So that's one error. They didn't look at that fax document, perhaps. And then the second was they didn't verify it on the computer. And then in the other case, they didn't go on the computer to verify that there was a second case and it's very clear from your forms that that's exactly what you need to verify, right? Your forms make it very clear that that's the biggest potential problem is that there's more than one case, and you have to make sure that what you're doing in one doesn't conflict. Okay, so in both cases, it was the hub officer who discovered the error. That's correct? All right, and then okay. I wanted to find out about reprimands. Major, can you just clarify for me, what is your position? I know you're a major, but what is, like, he's a warden and a commander, right, or something. What is your actual position, please? I'm
the operations commander.
Operations commander, and how does that relate to the platoon commanders?
The platoon commanders, they run the shift work.
Okay.
They supervise the line officers. I work in operations, doing other administrative duties.
So how come you said sometimes you will do these releases instead of the platoon commander?
Because sometimes the platoon commander, ma'am, is pulling posts, or if we're short of officers, I will become the platoon commander, and I will become the supervisor, and that platoon commander will go to the housing unit and work. Or sometimes the commander is in one of the units making their checks, and so when the documents come in, I'm the senior officer, I'm there, the officers will bring it to me, and I go ahead and I clear it to take the load off the supervisor. So I would go ahead and take care of it while the supervisors are doing their rounds.
All right. And if it's not you in that position, is there someone else on different shifts, or you're the only one?
I'm the only one.
You're the only.
I'm the only ops commander.
Okay, ops commander,
Yeah,
operations
commander, yeah,
correct.
I'm the only one.
All right. And then, all right, so in the way you describe how the procedure is supposed to happen, when there's some kind of discrepancy, warden sends a letter to the director requesting an internal investigation. The internal investigation report goes to the director also, right? So in the one case where you issued a letter of reprimand, why did that not come from the director? If the director's the one who's reading the reports and making the decision, why is the letter coming from you? Is that also normal?
Okay, so in this particular instance at this time, when this incident was happening, we did not have an internal affairs. Due to the shortage of personnel, we've had to reassign the officers to platoon to cover the shift. So there was no internal affairs section. We were shut down. So when this happened, again, the reports came in to me, and based on our conversation and our meetings, the advice was to go ahead and give a reprimand, so that's exactly what I did. I gave the reprimand.
Who's in the meeting? Who's in the management meetings?
It's our managers, the warden, the director, myself, the deputy director,
4 people. The 4 of you?
or some of the supervisors may be there, depending if they're on duty or not. There may be some supervisors. Each meeting is sometimes different of who shows up, depending on who's on duty and who's off, or what have you.
All right. But still, why do you normally issue letters of reprimand to people, or do they normally come from the director?
It is, no, the supervisors as a progressive measure.
Okay.
That is generally where it starts, at the supervisor level.
All right.
And then it will progress, if need be, to a more adversarial action with those reprimands attached, showing that progressive discipline was done.
All right.
In actuality, the director, ma'am, should never really have to issue a reprimand. That's at the lower level for reprimands to come.
Okay. And so on the second case, did you make a decision to issue the reprimand to the platoon commander, or was that a management decision, or the director's decision, or the acting director's decision?
Again, with consultation, again, I don't remember everything, but I know we did talk to the deputy director, and we gave the reprimand. It was, the incidents were kind of close together, and so we ended up giving a second reprimand. And then I gave reprimands to the other officers that were involved too.
All right. And so you also issued that second, in the second case, you did the reprimanding?
Yes.
All right. And so you're saying that you were satisfied with that discipline?
I mean, I talked to the officer, we trained her, and I was okay with issuing it. I mean.
All right. I guess, when we first were talking about the checklist, it sounded very clear what everybody's supposed to be doing, but then when we actually went through the cases, to me, it completely flipped as to what actually everyone is doing. It's not what it looks like they're doing according to this, or how we describe the process is supposed to work. So, when you said you assigned now someone else, an extra officer, extra personnel at a certain center to have extra eyes, where is that? Where in this process did you increase the personnel?
So we added an additional officer down to Agana, to the hub, to assist so that we have a second set of eyes, so there's more of a checks and balance there.
Okay. When did the letter of reprimand go to DOA?
I believe it was in July, ma'am.
Is that the normal process, or only after you discovered you had exceeded the 60 days?
Yes, ma'am, only after. But the normal process would be any letter of reprimand that is issued immediately comes to our office, and we forward a copy to DOA.
All right, but they're normally issued by the major?
Yes, and so anytime a reprimand is issued by command staff, then a copy is supposed to come to my office, to the
Okay.
director's office, and then we forward it down to their personnel jacket at DOA.
All right. When someone is released, they're just released literally they have gotten a precinct, in this case, the 2, just saying you're released, you can go, and your officers have no more involvement until they're picked up again?
Right.
Okay.
They're just, the gate is open and they're let out.
All right. Is there, now, not in these cases, but are there other releases where their time has expired, they've served their term, and can you release them, or you still wait for an order from the court?
Okay, so the releases that we've been talking for up to this point regarding our pretrial court releases, when a defendant is released by the court. There is another type of release, which is a full-time release, and that is when they have completed their sentence. And so those releases, when they become an inmate, once we receive the judgment is given to casework. Casework would do a sentence computation, would calculate their parole eligibility and all the other stuff, and also we'll have a release date on that. Now, when those computations, they come to me. They come to my office, and then when it's time, I have a folder for every month, and so every month I go through the folder, double check who's scheduled for release that month, and I prepare the release order. And that is a different document where I put the charges, the sentence, how long they served, and all that other stuff, and I prepare the release order.
All right. And
With the computation, because it's verified by casework.
Okay, great.
So there's another set of eyes to make sure that the numbers are matching up.
okay, and that's an all DOC process.
Yes.
All right. Okay, so let's talk about the other two cases that are still under investigation. Can you tell us, are those Hagåtña detainees, or were they located at Manila? And if you could just check if it,
Yes. I believe they're both from Agana, ma'am. They were both
right.
down in Agana.
were they the same platoon commander?
Ma'am, at this point, I can't discuss that. That's an ongoing case, and so I really can't discuss anything further regarding those other two erroneous release. We currently have our internal affairs that is investigating it at this time. As Major Uggan mentioned earlier, we didn't have an internal affairs in April, but I reactivated some officers because of these other cases that happened, these incidents that happened, so we currently have an internal affairs ongoing.
All right. And so those two cases, because they're in Hagåtña, we're going to guess that that's based on a delivered court order that triggered the action, right? Something like that. All right. All right, thank you.
Okay. Okay, I'd like to transition now into the incident of the assaulted officers. Can you please give us a breakdown of what had occurred for the assaulted officers? To include the timeline as well, please. Thank you, Director.
Can only talk about the one that was already adjudicated. We can't talk about the other.
So as you mentioned, there was 3 incidents that happened. Out of the 3 incidents, we can discuss portions of it. There are 2. One of the incidents has transpired in going to court in a criminal case, and the individual was found guilty of a misdemeanor. And so that's something that's already been completed in terms of in the court system. The other 2 were reported to the GPD, and they're currently ongoing investigations. So other than to tell you on the date and stuff, there's really nothing more that I can discuss with that, because it's also a pending investigation with the Guam Police Department. So I can tell you the date in the first incident, ma'am. That'll be on, one moment. On July 7th, there was an incident where an officer was assaulted by a detainee. And the detainee in this particular situation is one that actually went to the court system already, and he was convicted. It's Brian Matthews, and that case has been adjudicated at this time. So did you want to know? That was July 7th at 18:47 hours against one of our officers.
Thank you, Director. At what time?
I'm sorry?
What time are the inmates allowed to get air or free time when they're not in their cells? What are the timelines for that? Does it vary? Or?
It would vary by each unit.
Okay. How many units do you have at the correction facility?
18?
18?
18?
18 units. Can you give me the timeline for the 18 units? Of what time the inmates receive meals first, and then
Okay,
do
so-
they get areas to walk around in?
Lockdown is at 8:30.
Okay, that makes sense.
20:30.
20:30.
Yeah, 8:30 p.m. is lockdown. That's when they're secured in their cells or their cubicles, depending if they're not housed in cells.
Okay. So 20:30 to
0600.
0600. And from 06 to 20:30, they're able to walk around the facility
No, within their housing unit,
within their housing unit.
right? By 1900 hours, by usually 7 p.m., all inmates are supposed to be in their housing units, inside their range or the day room of whatever housing unit they're in.
Okay. So from 06 to 1900, they're allowed to be within their housing unit area.
Yes.
And they're also allowed to go to the cafeteria to get meals.
The meals, ma'am, are being catered, so their breakfast, lunch, and dinner is served to them at the unit.
At the units that
At the
they are
unit.
currently residing. Okay. Okay. Do you have any questions, Senator Shelton? The first one. Go ahead.
Okay, so on the case, on the first, we're talking about assault on officers. Did you say that that occurred when he was being the detainee was being transported to the courthouse? Or when did it occur? Sorry, I don't have the article in front of me.
No, that I didn't say. I said in the particular incident, the individual was arrested and charged out by the AG's office.
So when did it occur?
When did the actual incident
Yes.
occur? It occurred on July 7th.
No, I mean, when in the
Time.
day, yeah.
Oh,
What were the circumstances?
it happened at about 6:47 in the p.m. About 6:45.
In the unit?
Yes, it was in the housing unit.
It was, yes, it was at post 5.
So would you describe that as just kind of everything was in order except for this detainee? I mean, yeah,
Yes.
committing the offense.
right.
Otherwise, your procedures were, everything
Yes.
was in place?
Yes. The inmate went to get his laundry out of the laundry in the front of the building. The officer followed him out there and told the inmate he needs to go back inside, right? Because I think the inmate went out there without his permission, because the officer told him to wait, and he just walked out. So the officer went to tell him, you need to go in, and the inmate became upset and swung at the officer, and the fight was on.
How many officers do you have? Let me rephrase it. Is there any time that you only have one officer at a post?
Yes.
How often have you had this situation? Is this new this year, or have you always had, or there's always been instances where you've only had one officer at a post?
On this particular post, there were 2 officers assigned, but on other posts, one officer has been for a long time, maybe 10 years, maybe more. Some posts just run with one officer.
For 10 years or more?
Yeah.
Okay. What happened to the SORT team?
I can respond to that, ma'am. So in January of this year, when I came on board, there was 11 individuals assigned to our SORT team. There was 3 individuals assigned to our internal investigations. Because of our shortage of manpower, I disbanded our SORT team, and I took those officers and spread them out into our platoons so that it could assist because of our shortage of manpower, as well as our internal affairs. I also put them back into platoon so we could utilize them in platoon. We tried to separate and put sort members within the Alpha platoon, the day shift and the night shift, as well as some of our specialized units, to be fair, and to use them at their maximum so that we could reduce some of our manpower shortage.
So you took the sort team and you disbanded the function of the sort team. They're like a quick reactionary force.
Yes, ma'am.
And now they are with the regular shifts.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
we're still having issues with having one officer at a post.
Yes.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
even with those 11 personnel that you tried to maximize, the 11 officers that you tried to maximize, you still have instances with one officer at a post.
Yes, ma'am.
How many times has the sort team responded to incidences?
On numerous occasions.
What happened? Was the sort team present during the beating of Justin Meno?
No, ma'am.
Why didn't the sort team respond to when Justin Meno was being beaten?
Ma'am, at this point, I believe there's a pending case, so I would ask everybody at this table not to respond to any of those questions because of the ongoing case.
Has there been any instances where personnel are staying on for 24 hours?
Yes, ma'am.
So you're telling me that a correction officer works 24 consecutive hours?
It has happened, yes, ma'am.
How long has this been going on for?
I can only speak for my tenure there since January, so I know it's been happening. Prior to that, I'll defer to the warden and the major for them to respond.
What is the purpose of, or have they been historically working 24-hour shifts?
It has happened in the past. Myself, I pulled 24 hours. The warden himself has pulled 24 hours. Again, it goes back to just a lack of officers. We just don't have enough officers. You couldn't find a way to, do they still perform 24 hours currently?
Maybe in the last 2 weeks. I just got back last week, Thursday, but I think prior in the weekend, when I looked at the blotter, there were some individuals that remained and stayed on for 24 hours.
Could it have been avoided? Can it be avoided? Have you done every diligent effort to ensure that they don't work 24 hours straight?
Ma'am, because I'm not at the actual central or I'm not a platoon commander, it'd be difficult for me to respond to that. I would again defer to Major Uggan and the warden to respond to that. In terms of our scheduling, we moved to a 12P to 12A, as well as we were at a 5 and 2, 5 days on, 2 days off, that we changed to 4 and 3 to give our officers some time to have some rest and some family time. And but they were also on subject to be recalled on one of their days off. So a lot of them are working 5 and 2, even though we are at 4 and 3, as well as when they were working 5 and 2, they were working 6 and 1. And so we tried to balance it as best as possible. And based on our manpower shortage, because we also have individuals that were deployed in January of this year, and then we had another group that went to Egypt in May of this year. We had one that just went October for 1 year. So because of our military, the shortage because of the military deployments, as well as we've had individuals that have transferred to other agencies and also have quit the department, our shortage has grown. So we are trying to address this as best we can. Working with the warden and the major, one of the things they've asked for is to go back on 5 and 2. And in speaking with our acting deputy, we're looking at our command staff to present a plan to us so that we can look at it and weigh it and then make proper decisions so that we can continue to manage our manpower.
So how do they pull 24 hours? Is this by choice or? Because I understand, right, if like there's an emergency, we have typhoon or something like that, you might have to stay at the prison for 24 hours, maybe even 48, right? But how is this, I'm thinking that this happens even outside times where it's an emergency. So I understand the shortage of manpower, but you do have shift change. So how does this happen, that they still continue to do 24 hours?
Okay, every shift platoon has a certain amount of officers assigned to it. I believe it's about 43 to 44 officers assigned to a particular shift. So from 12 noon to 12 midnight, you may have 40-some officers assigned to that shift. And when you start putting in the RDOs, now the people that are reporting, the 43 are not reporting. It's only usually down to 20 that will report for duty. That's on a perfect schedule if everybody comes in. But then you have a few that will call in sick, family leave, medical leave, family emergency, they got annual leave and all this other. So now that drops down the number of officers that are actually scheduled to come in. And when you have 18 different housing units, a yard officer, recreate, galley, central, and all these other posts that you're supposed to cover, you know, we should have at least 31 to 40 officers on duty to meet our SOP requirements. But when you only have 20 or 19 that are reporting in, and the posts, a lot of these posts, you can't just send an officer home. The body has to be there. There has to be a body there. You can't shut it down. And so at times, for example, we had 3 people housed at GMH. So we had to send 3 individual officers on 3 different floors to GMH to monitor these people. And so we do our recalls. We call people in on their RDO, and some will respond and come in. Others, because of medical issues and other things, they're not able to work that many hours or come in. But the commanders do call in. We have canceled visitation. We have canceled other activities. We've taken other officers at times from our supply area, computation area. Even myself, be the commander, so that the supervisor can go to the housing unit to relieve them. But it's an everyday challenge because, again, at the end of the day, we only have a certain amount of officers, and it doesn't happen every day, but yeah, there are days when, especially when like weekend drill comes up,
Yes.
and we have quite a few that are on the drill status, we do try to coordinate, but again, even if I say, are you gonna come in tomorrow? They say, yes, I'll be there. Then it comes and they're calling out, sir, I'm sorry, I'm sick, I can't come in, or something else happens.
So these things are beyond your control, maybe?
These things are just constant every day trying to manage a workload
Okay.
to run a big
DOC.
facility like that.
Okay, so what is your population at Department of Corrections now?
We are about 670,
Okay.
give or take. We fluctuate. That's between Agana and Manila.
Okay, so Manila, what is your population at
About
Manila?
580, 501. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
I'm sorry. We have, as of this morning, we had 501 at the main facility. And then down in Agana, we have 174.
Okay.
We have 12 that are off island. So a total of, on island, we have 675.
675.
75.
Okay.
Want to break that down? We have 328 inmates, 342 detainees.
328 inmates and...
Inmates and 342 detainees.
What's the difference between inmates and detainees?
Okay, inmate is sentenced. They're serving their time. A detainee is being held by the court pre-trial. Pre-trial.
Pre-trial.
Basically.
When did the court start to mandate that the function of the Department of Corrections was to house detainees?
It's in our Enabling Act. It says the Department of Corrections shall be responsible for all places of confinement. And so we took over the detainee population because the TDC at the time, it was TDC back in 1994, we took over TDC from GPD. And so it's been our business ever since.
Okay. What is the, how many correction officers do you have on staff now?
Go ahead.
164.
Is there a federal guideline saying that you must have this many correction officers to each inmate or detainee, a certain ratio requirement?
No.
Do you create a guideline?
We do have
Or like a
a
formula in
manning
place?
requirement general order that shows how many officers should be on each post.
So how many
at any time.
officers should you have for 675 personnel?
It's not necessarily designed, ma'am, based on the inmate itself. It's based on the design of the facility and how many posts and sections we have to cover. So you could have a prison that had 700 prisoners, but if it's designed in a different manner that's more efficient, you could have less officers running it. But with us, we are between two different facilities. Manilao is 47 acres, and we have 18 different housing units. You have court transport, dental transport, medical transport, visitation, our maintenance crew, central control. We have supply, we have property, we have our DHB and our paytail. And we have our galley officer, rec officer, library officer. So these are all different
Spread out
positions
amongst the
in
compound.
addition to just the platoon itself, right? The platoon is the core of our operations. But to support the platoon, you need your library officer, you need your recreation officer, your central control officers, galley officer, visitation officers. If we have our perimeter officers out there on the perimeter, we should have at least 5 out there at any given time. Sometimes we have 1, sometimes we have none. And to run our prison using a National Institute of Correction staffing analysis formula, I would need about 320 officers to run my facility the way the SOPs mandate that we run it. But we don't have that, so we have 160, and that's from the warden. That's including the warden all the way down to the one armed security guard that we got.
So how many officers do you need for safety?
Okay.
You have 164.
Yes.
You had 300.
If we're going to adequately function on a daily basis, we need about 70 officers. This is just a unit, the post.
Is this for every shift change?
Yeah, again, it lessens on the evening shift because we need less.
I'm sorry, what?
It lessens in the evening. You know, we don't need that much officers in the evening. Not to say that we don't need them, but about 70. That's to run the main facility and Hagatnya to meet the manning requirements.
Do you have 70 officers?
On shift?
On
No.
shift?
Like what was explained by the major, we have 43 officers assigned to the shift. Now, that's not taking into account RDOs, regular days off,
Right.
sick
So you
leave, annual leave, military leave. So when you take that all into account, the numbers go down to about 20,
27.
25 to run the facility. That's why if you drive by it any given day, you won't see an officer out there in that perimeter post, let alone that first post when you enter a facility that's boarded up.
So you need additional 54 officers.
Yes, ma'am, so we can feel safe.
Thank you, because last term you told me that the prisoners were running the correctional facility. You know that the threat is there. Like the officers feel this kind of
Yes, the threat
intimidation.
Yes, the threat is always there. And again, lessen the numbers in corrections officers, even more so.
Are you recruiting or hiring any new officers at this point?
Yes, ma'am. We currently have 4 individuals we're looking for reemployment. Their applications have been moving forward. They're currently at the polygraph process with GPD, and we have 21 individuals that are currently going through the background investigation, and then once they're done, they'll go to the polygraph and then to the psych evaluation. So there's a process that we're going through, and so we're just waiting for the time that we will be able to bring them on board.
So you said 4 reappointment via polygraph or
4 reemployments that
Okay.
are currently at polygraph stage,
and 21.
and 21
With the
potential candidates that are at the background investigation.
Does the 2020 budget allow you to hire additional 54 officers?
No, ma'am, it doesn't. Currently, based on individuals who have transferred or have resigned from the department, and as well as all our FTEs that we had over the course of a few years, it appears we have approximately, I want to say up to 35 individuals that we're looking for to fill. So we have vacancies, about 35 vacancies, I believe. And so with the 4 reemployments and then the 21, so there is, again, the possibility that we'll have another recruitment and then we'll do interviews.
Okay. How long does the recruitment process take?
So in January of this year, when I came on board, it was announced as an open continuous with the Department of Administration. Just in September, we received the list for potential candidates, and we did our interviews.
How
So-
many personnel were on the list?
Excuse me?
What was the number of personnel on the list?
I believe the list that we received, I want to say, I think we had a total of 39, perhaps, ma'am, that
Right.
met the requirements in terms of the written test and the physical agility, that passed it and made it to the eligibility list.
Okay, and what happens at the eligibility list? Are you at the eligibility list now, or are you
We,
beyond
we,
that?
we interviewed from the eligibility list, and that's how we chose the 21.
Okay.
And then DOA was instrumental. And in the first week of October, they did another written test. They had, from our job fair that we had a couple months ago, they had potential candidates, and they did the written test, I believe, last week. And I believe towards the end of this month, they're going to do the physical agility. So then we'll have another eligibility list that they will prepare for us.
To get how many more? 10? Is it 35 total, the 21 plus 10, or are you saying 21 or 25 plus 35?
Yes, ma'am. But just be
Which
mindful.
one? Which one?
It'll be 35 total.
Oh, total.
Total. So with the 21 plus the 4, 25, and then 10 more. And of course, the 21 that are currently going through all the processes and stuff, we're hoping that they all make it through each step of the way so that we can hire them.
Who runs the internal affairs now?
Who runs the internal affairs? Currently, we have one individual that's assigned there, that's Officer Conception, and then we have another individual, it's TDY, there to assist her with the ongoing cases that we currently have.
When there are situations at DOC, do you deploy your own internal affairs, or do you ask for outside help?
With the erroneous releases that happened, I activated our internal to do that, but I've also reached out to GPD to see if they can assist us on some other situations that have happened or may happen.
Major, we had last term a situation with one of a senior officer who ran the internal affairs. Do you feel that DOC should still be able, or let's rephrase that, do you feel that each public safety should run their own internal affairs operation?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do, Senator. Again, when you're talking internal affairs, you're talking internal policies and procedures. If it's criminal, allegation is criminal, of course it goes outside the department, but if you had other agencies coming in, their challenge would be our policies and procedures and how things are done. So, that would be the challenge. So,
At what time would you think something is criminal?
again, if we're investigating something, stolen property or contraband or other things like that, if we suspect them, then we reach out to GPD and we will now work with them, because you would have now 2 simultaneous investigations ongoing. One is a criminal and one will be internal. Internal covers policies and procedures. Was the policies and procedures followed and adhered to? The other one is the law. Did they break the law criminally?
Is it possible that releasing inmates can be considered a criminal offense?
It's possible. I mean, if they did it intentionally or against policy, and it shows that they were doing it with intention to release the inmates against the wishes of the court, yes.
So, at what point would you decide that it's a criminal offense? At what point, after the first time, the second time, the third time, what point would you decide it could be a criminal offense? Because there is a law, right, that holds you accountable for releasing inmates, the 9 GCA.
Yes.
Yes. So, at what point would you say that would be suspect of a criminal offense?
I mean, if an inmate was released and there was no documents at all to justify any of it, no supporting documents, nothing from the courts, nothing, then ideally that would possibly be something to look at as criminal. But in these instances, there were documents. There were documents to release. There were documents to hold. And it was an oversight of the officer, made a mistake, of not checking his work, and it happened. But again, if there was, you go in and there's someone that's released and you say, where's your document? And there's nothing, that could be a different story now.
But wasn't the first incident a commitment order, not a release order?
Yes, again, the officer, for whatever reasons, overlooked it, and he saw a release order on it, and he released it, and it was clearly a oversight on his part.
Wouldn't you think that would warrant, if this happens second, a third, a fourth time, wouldn't you think after the first time, that a second time it occurs, or the third time it occurs, it would warrant an investigation from an outside agency?
Yeah, I mean, but even on the first one and the second one, the initial clearing officers were totally different. They were not the same officers. They were different officers that were clearing the inmate. It was another
Right.
set of officers. Other than the supervisor signing off on it, the same supervisor was on duty that signed off on it.
Right, but there's so many gaps in that investigation, especially in the first one with the password.
Okay, again, ma'am, it wasn't an investigation because there was no IA involved. It was a simple calling in the supervisor, calling in the officers, and finding out what happened. I didn't do a formal investigation as I would have done had I been assigned to IA, or that IA would have done, where it's a little bit more formal. Our was to call him in and say, hey, what happened? And then we compiled all the reports and we forwarded it down to the director's office.
So maybe you need to create I don't know if a checklist will do, because a checklist seems to be failing us right now, but a certain protocol to handle situations like this, like what questions you should ask when these things occur, because one, if a forgotten password, we don't know how long this officer has had that password. We don't know how often they change it. Even though it's not an investigation, wouldn't you be curious about events that occurred that led to this?
I mean, I did ask the officer what happened, and she said she couldn't access the system. She got locked out. I don't know when she got locked out, or she doesn't use the system often, so her losing her password, didn't surprise me, because there are few officers that don't access the system for a while. It's not there's only a handful of us that would actually go into the system on a daily basis.
Okay. Okay, do you guys have any questions? Okay, you're good? All right, I want to thank you for coming out here this evening. I want to thank you for answering the questions to the best of your ability. Just as a recap, some of the requests that we have to the Oversight Chair to myself are the due-outs for 2014, dating back to 2014 erroneous releases, and to especially verify 2018 documentation in the internal affairs filing cabinet, because I'm thinking that's where it would be kept, right? That's what you said? Okay. And then the court order timelines for each instance of the inmates being erroneous released. when did the court order come to DOC, the processing time, the release time. And the reason why this is such a big deal for me is because there's a case ongoing, right, involving the mayor. And it was mentioned in the trial, in the comments, that the mayor wanted $15,000 to release inmates from DOC, like he had connection to DOC officers. And so this is the big elephant in the room, like, we need to find out exactly what's going on in the chain and find out how to fix these things and hold those accountable. And if we keep on giving people a slap on the wrist, then we're doing the community a disservice. I mean, one of the inmates that were released was because his record has acts of violence. Another inmate's record was of drugs. And so we're releasing these people. Okay, maybe it's a mistake, but maybe we need to do a better job at investigating. Maybe we need to really think about whether we're going to investigate this and investigate it, especially because of the things that have been coming into the light. And I want to help you. I'm asking you about your manning, because it seems that your attrition rate is very high. You know, you have officers leaving DOC, you have officers moving to other agencies or just quitting in general. So how do we fix that? Do we tell the governor that she needs to make DOC a state of emergency? Or do we need to have a timeline to lessen the restrictions so that you can hire more personnel in a more expedient manner, because you're losing personnel quickly, right? I don't know, you tell me what is the best action?
I believe with your assistance and with everybody here that we could ask that we could lift some of the restrictions for our recruitment so that we could hire our officers quicker and possibly go through the process of the background investigation, the polygraph, and the psych eval instead of doing it before they're hired, to get these individuals who perhaps have a criminal justice certificate from GCC. They've already been trained, and try and recruit them and then give them the 1 year when they go on as a full-time employee and they have to go through the probationary period, then vet them accordingly through all that processes, and then train them and put them on the line, and then hopefully through all the three processes that they pass it, and we can move forward. It's just a suggestion, ma'am, but it's just something that we just need assistance to look at DOC and give us more officers as quick as possible.
Okay. Sorry, I wanted to ask about this erroneous release. But I forgot the question. The erroneous release that happened, is it still under investigation, the last one, or did you have 2 additional erroneous releases? So I'm thinking you, from what I know, you have 4.
4.
And 2 are still under investigation.
Yes, ma'am.
Is this under investigation from internal affairs at DOC, or is this under investigation from an outside agency?
At DOC, ma'am.
So you've had 4 erroneous releases, and you still want to use the internal affairs at DOC to investigate the erroneous release at DOC?
Yes, ma'am. Major Egan pretty much summed it up when he said because of the processes we have and the rules and stuff that DOC has, at this point, bringing in another law enforcement entity, and they'd have to learn all of our processes and procedures, our rules and regulations in order to do the actual internal affairs, which could actually delay it. And I know now they're at the 90-day period in terms of any kind of proposed adverse action. So at this point, I would continue to have our internal investigations work on these two investigations, and perhaps maybe down the road, if there's something that transpires that I can get assistance from GPD or Customs. But it's really difficult when they don't know how we function.
Do you think that that's a sound decision to make, to have internal affairs at DOC investigate their own personnel for actions that recurred 4 times already?
Yes, ma'am, for these two that we're going to do it, yes, I would continue to stand firm on that belief.
Okay. Okay, I want to thank you for your time. We have exhausted the items on the agenda. We may have to come back and have another oversight. We are still pending some additional information because there has been talk also that the marshals are involved in this erroneous release. I don't know how, and I don't know the processes that they have. I mean, I know they physically walk some of the documents over to your precinct. So, we need to take a look and see what areas, if we can work with the Judiciary Oversight Chair or maybe with you, and see the impact on the marshals, the impact that marshals have within engaging, releasing inmates. So this concludes our oversight hearing. It is 8:33 in the evening. I want to thank all of you for coming. Thank you for the hard work that you do, and please, if there's any way that we can assist you further, some of the issues that we discussed, we'd like to get more personnel, perhaps waive some of the hiring requirements, address your shortage issues. These are areas that we're definitely looking into resolving in the very near future, okay? Thank you very much. Have a good night. God bless.